Hello, hello. I wanted to continue on the same thought that we've been talking about how to hear God, and we're talking about a step-by-step guide to hear his voice. And we know the scripture tells us that my sheep hear my voice. And this is Jesus speaking. And I know that you, if you're taking this class, want to learn how to hear from God. So it's important that we recognize that God is speaking much more than we think. He's speaking all the time. And the important part for you to remember is that you already hear his voice, but you just don't realize it, that God is the one who is speaking to you. The prophet Samuel also had that same issue when he was a little boy sleeping beside the presence of God. And God spoke out, Samuel, Samuel, and got up and Samuel got up and ran to Eli. And this reoccurred and reoccurred until Eli realized it wasn't him, it must be God. And so he told Samuel to, if he heard it again, to say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." Samuel didn't realize the voice of God straight away because he hadn't heard it before. He hadn't really tuned himself. But once he did recognize that God was speaking to him, his whole world changed. He became a huge mouthpiece, really, for God. And so people have really made the idea of hearing from God as something that's complicated and you have to be super spiritual, when it's really very simple. Hearing God speak isn't just for the super holy, right? It's not for those who have committed hours and hours of fasting and prayer and listening quietly, right? Nothing's wrong with that, but it's not just for them. It's for anyone who's called by his name, because that's what the scripture says, my sheep hear my voice. So we can connect with God and we can learn how to hear him speak, and how we can recognize that he's speaking directly to us, and we can hear his voice every day. And that's really how it's meant to be. Who would want to be in a relationship with someone that they only heard from them once a year or ever at all, right? God is speaking all the time. In the book of Job, which is not a book that most people think is one of their favorites to read, but in the book of Job, chapter 33, verse 14, the scripture says, "For God does speak, now one way, now another, though man may not perceive it." And that's exactly what happens, is that he is speaking. He speaks this way and he speaks this way and he speaks this way, but we don't always perceive it. So God is communicating to you in ways that you often overlook. He has many ways of speaking, and he doesn't always speak in the way that you're expecting him to, right? Not in the way that you think, okay, this is going to come and it's going to be, oh, it may not be like that. It may, but it may not. It's never been that way for me. And there are several different ways that God speaks. And so expect to be surprised. You can really hear God every day. And most likely, if you belong to him, you already are. You're just not recognizing it really. Discover how to tune into what God is saying to you is what I want to do with you over the next few days. Because nothing is more important than learning to listen and to hear God. Sometimes people will say, well, what does his voice sound like? This is something that's personal to you, and we learn to recognize when God is speaking. I just currently had a time when I was in my office here, and I had some worship music going, and I just knew that one of my grandchildren was going to have a baby, and they were going to have a baby boy. And I just started praying for this new baby boy and for my grandchildren, and both the mother and the father, and began just really talking about it to the Lord about this new baby. And a few days later, I began to wonder. It was so real to me that I remember thinking, was that real? And then I couldn't remember if it's something that I'd heard from my daughter. Had she told me that? How did I have this information? And then I realized when I talked to my daughter that no, that's not what is. And so I realized that God was speaking to me and that he was giving me some things that he wanted me to pray about. And, you know, that's just one way. Sometimes we'll be going along and we'll be thinking about something. We've been talking to the Lord about something. And then all of a sudden, there it is, almost like a sign along the road. It might even be a sign along the road. And you look at it and you know that you know that you know in your knower that God has just answered your question. It can be something as simple as that still small voice on the inside of you. You know that this is what God is leading you to do. This is the answer that He has told you. Maybe you hear a voice, or maybe you just know within your knower. And those aren't the only ways, but those are a few of the ways that we need to train ourselves to be able to recognize that God is speaking to us. The Bible also says, Jesus actually said, he who has ears, let him hear. And so we can ask the Lord, you know, open my ears so that I can hear you. I have ears, but I'm not hearing you. And so, or I'm not recognizing that you're speaking. And so I need to learn to do that. So we can ask him to do that, to give you the ability to hear. Just like a radio station, we tune in, right? So that you'll get tuned to his frequency. I will tell you, when you begin to look for something, you're going to find it, because we've had this illustration. We use it all the time in one of our mentoring groups, that a woman bought a brand new car in a certain make and a certain model and a certain color. She'd never seen them before. Once she bought that car, she started seeing them on the road exactly like hers all the time. It's happened to me. I own a white Honda Pilot, and I'd really never paid much attention to a white Honda Pilot until we purchased this one. Now I see them all the time. Sometimes I have to take a double take that this one isn't mine. I was in the grocery store parking lot, came out the other day and went up because it was parked in the same area, not really paying attention, but went up to it. And I thought, this is not right, because I happened to glance up and it had the travel things on the top and mine doesn't. And so I was like, whoa, wait a minute, this is not my car. So we began to see things. There's maybe not a great illustration, but it's true. I run into these things all the time now. Never saw them before. So we have to recognize that we have to activate our spiritual ears to hear. We may have not discovered that there is a frequency that we're not tuning into, whether it's that small voice inside of us, whether it's being able to recognize the leading of the Spirit, but it's a spiritual ear that we need to learn to tune ourself into, truly. So it's important that you do that. And along through this class, we're going to be talking about ways that you can do that, how you can learn to hear what God is saying. And you can learn to pray back his replies, or pray for requests and get them answered, right? And so these are great things to do. So God is a loving father, right? I love that song. He's a good, good father, right? I listen to it several times a week, and it's one that God is just truly, truly using in my life right now. And that's really true. He is a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are, right? And he is this father that we have, who is good and loving and kind and wants to provide for us. This is all information that's available in his word, right? Who his deepest desire is to have a conversation and a relationship with us. So much so that we are his beloved, right? And we're his creation. He's adopted us. And there's just so many wonderful things about what he says about who we are, that we can know that he wants to have that deep, intimate communion with us. And so it thrills me to be able to say that as you go along through this class and go along through these instructions, and then you're asking, the step on this one is to ask the Lord to give you spiritual ears to hear, and ask him to help you to tune to the right frequency, right? If you're listening in the car to a radio, and then you hear a siren outside and someone says something in the back seat, these are all three different sounds that are going on, and you can hear all of them, and you can tune in specifically to one or the other, or all three at the same time. You can still do that in the spirit realm. You can be driving down the road, have someone talking, have the radio on, and still hear the voice of God. I will tell you, it's a little easier when you're quiet first until you learn to tune that in, but you can also listen to the world and have one ear tuned to the Spirit. So I'm looking forward to hearing some really great testimonies about how God has taught you to tune your spiritual ear. All right, well, we'll see you in the next video.